The Quarantine Sessions podcast with J. Cole.
Hey bro, what's up? Okay, there we go.
That was
How's it going?
amazing. That was
Yeah.
like Kaleidocobrin.
Did you know that I could do that?
I
I
had
bet
no
you didn't even
idea.
know
I
that I
would
could do
love
that.
to learn how to do that. You got to show
Yeah.
me that trick, man.
I know that you have a lot of Jedi powers and stuff, but I do too. I just keep it more
Yeah.
on the DL than you do.
It's all good, you know. Sometimes you gotta hide your capacity to do mirror ninja moves in the closet for a while.
For sure, man. How you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah, it has. Life is amazing. It's very full, very rich. But yeah, it's been epic. I've been deeply focused on working on a couple different white papers in mathematics, and one in particular that's really super intense for the encryption world because it
Hmm.
reveals some secrets about prime numbers and the nature of prime-based encryption. And then the other half of my time, I've been massively engaged, getting ready, ramping up fundraising for Core.Network, which is my project that we very fondly refer to as the last social network. It's sort of a Iron Man style integrative dashboard that lets you have a full command center for all the different streams of your social web and lets you instantly create, monetize content, connect peer to peer, build an audience, and never have that audience taken away from you by any other company, organization, or whatever. So direct, own your own data, own your own network, kind of approach. So that's a lot of my focus these days.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And where are you currently in the world?
I'm in Boulder.
In Boulder. Cool.
Yeah,
Great.
beautiful mountains of Colorado.
Mhm.
Summer's been kicking in, so it's been really nice.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you have the freedom to kind of go out and explore a bit more. You're not completely locked at home.
Yeah, I mean, I've been mostly quarantining just out of one loving the opportunity to kind of retreat because
Mm.
in my life and work with conferences as well as having my office in Santa Ana with Robert at Crown Sterling, last year was like pretty much I'd be home for 4 to 5 days, sometimes if I was lucky, maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks, and then I'd be on a flight again.
Right.
So it's been a great time to really just be grounded and be still and home and, do some of the deeper wizard work, some art that's been wanting to get done, and some self-development, and then a lot of this core network building.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think
Mhm.
that the circumstance is a great opportunity for anybody that's more primed to look inward.
Mhm.
And for people like that, it's not even much of a inconvenience. It's what people would be wanting to do anyway,
Yeah.
especially artists and musicians and people like yourself who are more self-directed.
Mhm. Yeah, I find great joy in it. And I get outside and walk around the neighborhood and going into town in Boulder, it's lively and people are around and hanging out downtown and there's not a lot of tension and fear here, and there hasn't been even since the beginning. But everybody's very respectful and being very conscious. And Denver's been going off a little strong lately with the Black Lives Matter movement, and
Mhm.
my friend Stefanity here has been really active, in trying to fight forced vaccination, which has been being pushed through here.
Mm.
And so I'm somewhat active both in listening on those fronts and communicating where and how I need to help strategically.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I'm not out protesting, rioting. I'm chilling and just, holding the field and sending out what messages I can to support.
Mm. Yeah, that was something I definitely wanted to speak to you about. Is just kind of, I think that you've put a lot of emphasis into research on systems that exist within nature that can help us realize a more unified consciousness. And I think that the world is essentially in a crisis state, where we're in this pivotal period of change and disruption. And I'm curious, based on your research, what you think are tangible, actionable steps that the average person can kind of take to help realize this vision that many people like you and I have shared, which is the vision of a unified consciousness on the planet.
Yeah. There's tons of things that we can do. I find that the trim tabs, as Bucky Fuller would call it, like the key leverage points, really are internal. So it has a lot to do with how we look at our own natural habits of operation and what it is that we choose on a daily basis, how we look at the lens of whether we put groups of people in a box or not when we're thinking about people working at a restaurant or people working in a field farming or people doing this job or that, and what we kind of naturally expect or think is the way things should be. Those are the kind of foundational assumptions where, at least with the issue of racism, like that's where it creeps in. It's the habitual thought patterns that are usually passed as sort of a framework of understanding either by our parents or oftentimes by movies and media. Like if by nature you think of a ghetto and the first thing you think of is black people living in that ghetto, that's racist. And it's a very kind of I would say normal process that people have those kinds of programs installed because we've been washed by it for so very long. And until we actually consider and really look at our thinking process and where and how we're making judgments inadvertently, then we can't change them. And the same is true with dealing with your trash. If you're just used to throwing your banana peels in the trash can every time and you've always done it since you were a kid, like nobody can blame you for that. That's okay. It's a natural part of your process that you're generating that waste. But it requires realizing there's another solution, and that solution might be actually digging a hole and making a compost patch or whatever, and starting to work with different behaviors. And if we're going to go to like a global scale of change, I think we have to really question assumptions that we've made about other races, about religions, about behaviors that we believe to be localized to certain regions on Earth, and really address these different layers of assumption that we've got baked in and start kind of unraveling them and unpacking them and researching and reading great authors and learning more in areas that can help us really expand our minds and open up to other ways of looking at things.
Yeah, it seems like our behaviors come out of our beliefs, and that's kind of the root cause. And that's what you're addressing. It's all the unconscious programs that we run, the assumptions that we have about people, even I think our concepts of self, the idea that, you and I or two people are separate, that creates a lot of disharmony on the planet. If people embraced a perspective in which they see every person on the planet as being just another aspect of themselves, I think there would be less bloodshed and less conflict.
I personally look at that as a process, right? Not just an end game, because the reality is that the spiritual development required to perceive others as though you're perceiving yourself requires a long time of actually looking at yourself and getting to know yourself. Because most of the major things that we fight against, that we make issues in our lives, a lot of times the things we have the greatest issues with are projections from our own shadows. They're the things that trigger us within because they're connected to our own trauma. They're connected to our own lives. And we want to resolve those things. We want to see them. And sometimes that means people externalize those traumas as projections on others. And there's also there's also a dynamic issue where, if we leap straight to this idea that we're one and everybody's one, then we can miss the part of the process where we develop good boundaries. And good boundaries actually enable us to be in relationship with others. Without a good boundary, it's all messy and it's all mosh. So if you've ever lived in like a community household, I've done this, many times, and lived with homies, and it was like, yo, dude, it's cool. Like, we're all one, we all share everything. But then the next thing you know, like over and over again, your chips are gone because other people ate them. It's like, okay, cool, but maybe I want to eat my chips sometimes, and there can be also different kinds of psychological distortions that can occur if we just leap straight there, such that if we see somebody going through something bad, for example, and they're really having a hard time, one of the kind of new age faux pas is that people would say, well, you're creating that, so it's your fault. Gosh, I'm sorry you got abused, but you created that. And this actually reinforces trauma rather than helps to unwind and resolve, something that's a deep wound where a person did not choose the action of having this other person be abusive to them. Like, that's just not how it works. But over time, as someone evolves and works through their trauma and is able to move through the stage of creating effective boundaries, which is like individuating, owning themselves, owning the journey of their life, really learning how to say, no, this is mine, this is my space, and that's okay. Then the next stage in spiritual development is an inner kind of natural awakening where you realize that when you got abused that one time, that there was a reason for that. And that at a higher level, your higher self did make that choice to some extent, and you can start to actually see the nature of what that choice is that you've made. But when it's used to, blame somebody else, when nobody ever can tell you, like, you chose that bad thing. Oh, there's only the point where you yourself can choose to accept it that way in order to transcend the victimization that you maybe went through, the pain that you went through, own the experience, and be able to really regain mastery and control over command in your life. But that's not something that just happens overnight. And I think that people try to leap straight to that, I'm one, and they lose all of the beautiful steps on the path in between.
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to hold the awareness that that's what exists behind the veil, but that within this manifest realm, we are separate and we have different cultural backgrounds and stuff like that. And I actually read this article that Ram Dass wrote where he had a bunch of social activists that were mostly around like black rights and stuff like that all came together. And then there were spiritual teachers like Ram Dass and rabbis and things like that were all together to have this conversation. And Ram Dass kind of did his like, we're all one shtick, and people got really upset about it. They're like, don't tell us that we're all one. I want you to honor our cultural diversity. I want you to listen to our struggle. And it was like a whole week to the point where everybody collectively was sharing their trauma and people were actually being listened to. And when that happened, when it got to a point where every group had the capability and the opportunity to share their personal journeys and their subjective experiences and their traumas, and everybody kind of grieved together, then that topic of unity could enter into the conversation and actually be heard and received.
Yeah.
But it is a bit of like a bypass. And I see people just through social media or whatever kind of gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
And it's a very nuanced issue. And yes, that's true. And there's also all this other stuff that needs to be addressed, dealt with, respected, etc., in order to arrive to that perspective and conclusion.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, even in the act of information sharing, I don't know if you've experienced this at all, but I've certainly seen it a lot where someone is just coming across a piece of information, a direct personal story, something about what's going on right now at a protest or whatever, and they share it. And maybe you pass it along and you say, hey guys, pay attention. This is pretty serious. And I've had quite a few messages, you know, in the last month of people fully coming at and attacking me, claiming that I'm just propagating the violence and the problem by creating conflict, where I should be just like just holding space for peace. But like, okay, yeah, but there's that is bypassing. Like if you ignore what's happening right in front of your face and you're not willing to look at it, and you're like, no, no, it's all peace and love, man, like that doesn't exist, like that's spiritual bypassing. And it's something
Sure.
that we have to be very cautious around right now, because there's actually quite a lot of information streams that it kind of encourage bypassing of the direct issues that we're dealing with, the real stuff that we're facing right now, the changes we really need to make. And that's giving lots of like beautiful, like grass is greener on the other side and it's all flowers. And, you know, don't worry, all the evil in the world's being taken care of behind the scenes, you know, like,
Hmm. Yeah.
and the problem is, it's like, okay, cool, if some of that's happening, show me some real data, like let's actually see it, like what is it that's actually happening. But if you're paying all your attention to that and you're missing, you know, rights of a people being ripped away from them, like live on the moment, that's no lie, it's like actually happening, and you know, abuse is happening right in front of our face, if you're ignoring that in the hope of this some storyline outcome where there's not even any real data, then yeah, it's a lot of bypassing. And I can understand. I have deep compassion for that need in people to really hold on to something very hopeful, and to take in a story that's going to let them feel some relief from the challenge that's happening on this planet. I
Hmm.
give people that relief sometimes too by helping them understand the larger planetary context, the galactic context, where we're going. But if we, even when we hold the vision of where we're trying to get to, you know, if that's a fully sustainable Earth with all the peoples in peace and no longer having nation states and having star parts all over the planet and being able to travel to other worlds and having energy systems and replication systems that give us all the basic resources we need, so we eradicate poverty and starvation and all of these kinds of things, like that's a powerful flag to hold. And we still have to march in that direction, which means we
Yeah.
still got to deal with the rocks right in front of us and the gullies and the rivers and the, you know, like all the things. We still got to deal with those as we move towards that flag that we're planting.
Right. Yeah. One of my personal criticisms about kind of New Age ideology and metaphysical thought is that it often involves these very kind of complex ideologies that the average person can't quite wrap their head around. And I think that what you're saying is that we need to have a system that takes everybody along with it. And it's not so much there's people that understand these technologies and have these visions and know how to create all these systems. That's important, but you also need to be able to communicate these ideas to the average person and help the rest of the world transition into that new reality. And I think that there's just often this disparagement in understanding, where if you kind of just went to the average person, somebody that's in one of these protests, and you're like, we can create free energy devices and we can build starports and like whatever, they would be like, bro, like what are you talking about? Like this is going on right
Here's a
now.
mask,
You know?
you know, like deal. Here's a jug
Yeah.
you can catch the tear gas in. Like focus
Yeah.
on that. We'll talk about
Exactly.
starships later. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And also I guess a lot of a lot of kind of new age thinking isn't really very grounded, and it's like what you're talking about too. A lot of it kind of swirls around in the realm of ideas and stories and beliefs and things like that, rather than what can actionably and tangibly be implemented towards directly creating real change on the
Yeah,
planet.
yeah, yeah, and a lot of that is it's it's a self-development process. It's an education process. It's a grounding process, you know, which means descension, so to speak. So it's about gathering the information that you need at the higher levels of yourself and bringing that information down and bringing it into actionable steps in your life. You know, one of my big pet peeves over many years has been the kind of ascension movement, you know, quotation marks, and the fifth dimension as constantly being propagated is like, oh, we're all moving to the fifth dimension. And a lot of times I've seen over the years, and it's not everybody that does this, but a lot of people have translated that as like, we're going to just suddenly like vibrate at a level that we just vanish and we go into a higher plane of existence. And you know, from the beginning, as a teenager, I was working on dimensionality, both from a physics concept and metaphysics, and I talk a lot about it in my unified harmonic matrix work. When you go higher in dimensions, you don't lose the lower ones, right? So if you're incorporating the fourth dimension, you don't lose the 3 dimensions of space, you know, when you tap into time or whatever, if you consider the fourth being time. I don't. I consider that the second, actually, but that's just the nature of time itself. You know, as soon as you have space, as soon as you have a beginning and a movement in some direction, you now have time. So time is very deeply embedded in the nature of this sort of 4D structure. But when you go to 5D, you don't lose that 4D. It's not that you lose your sense of time or you lose your sense of your body or that the body goes away. You know, if you want to transcend the body and leave the body, well, there's a very easy way to do that, and it's called death. And we're all going to go through that at some point. But if you're trying to access fifth dimensional consciousness, it's actually about gaining perspective on time and space. It's about opening a new point of perception where you're able to see the patterns and the changes and the dynamics in time and space from a larger point of view that incorporates those changes and all the different dynamics of them over a long period of time. You know, interestingly enough, James Redfield wrote about this very well back when he wrote the Celestine Prophecy back in 1995, 96, I believe is when that came out. And my dad gave me the book shortly after that. And he called it the Longer Now Insight. And it's a beautiful one because it's one in which you start to look at all of history and all of time as part of a longer journey. And you begin to see why certain things happened throughout history that have led us to this moment. And it's important to embrace that perspective because it creates the space for you to make peace with things like the Holocaust. It creates space for you to make peace with things like Christianity claiming the pentagram is evil and slaughtering, indigenous tribal people all over Europe. You know, and you begin to realize that, you know, these kinds of moments of trauma in our collective history are distortions that are generated out of a lot of little traumas. And when you work your way back, you find the place where these things, you know, originally came from. And that also means you get to start originally seeing where knowledge of the pentagram came from and, you know, where the swastika came from. And you start to realize like all of these symbols that people have thought are evil for all this time or have been made evil by these massive collective trauma events are actually part of beautiful, deep, sacred traditions with huge amounts of wisdom about life and ways to apply that in life. You know, if someone took a symbol like, you know, the peace sign or the fingers doing peace and they started wearing it on their patches while they went around slaughtering people, you know, yeah, people are going to start associating that symbol with bad. It just as has happened recently with like ISIS, for example. People use the word ISIS now mostly to refer to like a terrorist Islamic group, when that name is so sacred to so many people all over the world who have a deep relationship with the goddess Isis. And even the meaning of Isis, which is completely opposed to this way that we project on this Islamic group, because the goddess Isis is actually about embracing all the feathers of life, which means all of the spectrum, which means it doesn't matter who someone is, like you have to learn how to love them and embrace them, because everyone has a gift. And we're just, it's like, oh, it hurts,
It makes me wonder if there's even some kind of coercive intention to claim these powerful positive symbols and turn them into something evil, because I think that we exist like in a symbolic universe.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's the water we swim in, so to speak. And a lot of these symbols like the swastika or like the pentagram, which you mentioned, yeah, they represent deep, wholesome wisdom traditions, but they've been, co-opted and taken and changed into something evil. And I just wonder if there's something really specifically dark about that, rather than them just creating their own symbols to use and then that existing something separate. There's something a little bit more devious about taking a symbol that already existed as a symbol of peace and turning it into a symbol of hate and evil and destruction.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to take the ISIS stance, the highest stance, we all inevitably we will come to realize that those such actions are forged from and caused out of trauma, right? So there's some wound there, and there's some reason and reaction to that wound that causes this kind of distortion in the first place. And that being said, we live in a world where, there's yang and yin, and that means boundaries, and that means like actually, bringing forth the magic of justice and the energy of weighing the scales and, considering whether an action is actually for the good or not for people. And from the place of guardianship, where we develop mastery over our own sovereignty and begin learning how to extend that to support the sovereignty of others, it's been massively concerning for me seeing certain things happen in the past few years. The last most recent one, which was seemingly very obviously a well-constructed disinformation campaign designed to create division within a highly progressive community, highly aware of both truths in a lot of conspiracies, of disclosure and what was happening with that. That giant disinformation campaign I like to just fondly refer to as the flat earth theory. And it's incredible to me, and also was extremely painful for me to see how many people that I knew and loved and who I considered to be very intelligent and aware of a lot of the major challenges, aware of a lot of the kind of deeper underbelly of information, intelligence agencies and things like that, got just swept into it. Maybe because one person that they highly respected got into it, David Wolf maybe, or something like that, and like they get swept into this, and the essence of the disinformation campaign can always be identified by one very simple thing. And this is a very, very good measure to kind of use as a truth gauge with almost anything that you get, that gets spread like this, is that if the stance of the believers is such that it's either true and you believe it all the way and you join them, or you're freaking insane and you should be cussed at and you should be turned against and you're stupid, and all these names, all this intensity, all this violence and division is on the other side of protecting this little idea, that's a really good sign that whatever it is that you're being taught is probably laced with all kinds of BS. Right. And it's happened with every one of the campaigns like that. And, I've had a huge, significant amount of concerns about about the kind of communication and work that groups like QAnon have been propagating lately,
Right.
because I see a lot of information that is, boy, don't we all want it to be true? Like, don't we all want to latch onto it and really hope that it's true and really coming true? But not the data to back it. And the problem is if you question it and you say, but wait, how could that be true? And yet I'm also seeing this right now, like, happening, it's being tweeted like 5 minutes ago, like live by this person. And you're telling me that they're doing this, but they're tweeting that. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And then when the kind of answer, the wash is that, oh, well, they're just all lying to you. It's all made up. It's all fake media. Like, everything that you see in the news is fake media. That rings right along the lines of flat earth theory, because it's saying, well, no, actually, you can't trust anybody. You can't trust NASA. You can't trust any of the astronauts. You can't trust any scientists. You can't trust anybody who's ever perceived the curvature of the earth. Like, they're all distorted. They're all lying to you. Everybody's lying to you. And when you start going down that rabbit hole, it's like, it's the road to insanity, It's literally a road to insanity.
Well,
So,
it's kind of like,
yeah.
I guess the perspective is that perspective of we're being deceived, which I think is true, but it's only true to an extent.
Sure.
But
That's right.
It's not really a healthy perception to take of the world, that everything that you experience is that you're being lied to all the time about everything. I don't think that that's true, actually. I think there's also people that have good intentions and they are trying to present true data with the intention of helping. And I think it's kind of a wiser perspective to just acknowledge that we don't really know, which is difficult because humans crave certainty and need to attach onto something solid. And if you don't have that, then that's terrifying. You live in this existential terror moment of like, oh my God, we're confronting infinity and we're overwhelmed and we have no idea what's going on. But that's a truer statement than almost anything else you could say, really.
Yeah.
And it comes out of, it's almost the same as people who get very paranoid. It's like, people that think that they're constantly being surveyed and watched and hunted down or something like that. It's the pronoic perspective, which is the spin that absolutely everything that's happening is for some kind of utopian outcome, is kind of just as it's just as shaky a perspective as the paranoid one. They're like two sides of the same coin because they're both a distortion,
Yeah, we should all take, a note from Buddha on that one. And it's like, walk the middle path, like, it's okay to question everything. It's good to question. It's good to inquire. It's good to research. It's good to dive in and look at things. And it's also good to be very observant of what's true, witness what you can tell is true and what you can know is true. And if you have built a solid base for yourself of what you know to be true, and that you can very well prove and test anytime and come back to the same results, that builds a really powerful foundation. That's grounding. So like when I was in high school, I had these experiences discovering that I had a human energy body, right? And I could feel this field of charge around my fingers. And in doing martial arts, I started doing them blindfolded with my friend Chris, and we would like go faster and faster and faster with each other, see how quick we could do it and feel where the tingles were to be able to block each other. And that for a lot of people, like just that discovery and the experience of the truth of energy would be enough. But the thing is once you realize how unlimited energy is and what you can do with it is, it can move you through that space of discovery into sort of Messiah complex, where you realize, oh my God, I have the power of God within me. I have the ability to do everything, and like everything I see is everything I'm creating. And it's ripe with certain, as different avatars would say, like spiritual or metaphysical roadblocks built in, to ensure that you don't destroy yourself in the world, like through your gathering of power and self-knowledge. And so for me, the grounding was actually to play with friends of mine in high school and create a field of chi between my hands, and let them feel it and see it and watch other people open their eyes to something they've never seen, never experienced before, and don't have an explanation for. They don't know what that is. They don't know how to process it. And for me, testing different methods and playing with that and anchoring what works every time, what doesn't, and what are properties of this and what are not properties of this. Those were the kinds of like applications of science through myself that helped me really deepen my exploration of metaphysics and then into magic. And by the time you get into creation and magic and the creative application of sacred geometry for manifesting your reality, having a lot of discernment is really good. It's really good to have methods of knowing what works and what doesn't, because it's pretty easy to create things we would rather not have, in that process as well.
Yeah, I think that anything should stand up to a kind of rigorous, discerning way of thinking about it, whether you're looking at magic or metaphysics, or you're looking at, I don't know, geometry or physics or whatever it is. It's just a way of discerning what is true and what is practical and what is false and useless.
Yeah, we have to be able to weigh and measure that field of truth. And one of the other guidance points that I find is really useful for a lot of my Jedi students over the years, and just for friends and helping people kind of figure things out, is that innately our body is a natural antenna that can feel the charge and frequency of things that are true and that are not. And the best way that we can actually get in touch with that is the same way that we get in touch with any gift, which is by looking at first the place of the shadow that we've faced that has caused us to have to learn this lesson, right? So when you get in touch with the parts of yourself and the times in your life where you lied about something and you had to keep a lie, that experience of keeping a lie and playing it out and hiding it in whatever way and going through that actually puts you in touch with the charge of what it feels like to hold information that is false. And to have to share that with others, you can actually feel the tension and the stress and the ways that you physiologically respond to the act of holding a lie in your being and telling a lie to somebody else and backing that lie. And for some people, you may have told a lie at some point in your life and you may have kept it for years, and carrying it for that period of time, you've learned that having to back it up over and over again is like dragging a giant weight through your life. And for most people, eventually, the weight breaks them at one point or another, and sometimes it's the same day, sometimes it's the next year, And when that weight finally breaks and you feel that release, you actually feel that state of lightening. And even though it may be painful and terrifying, and you might have all kinds of challenges that you have to face with coming to that truth and admitting it to yourself, admitting it to other people, the amount of weight released from your being is so exquisite feeling. It's like, it's this amazing lightening and illuminating that moves through your life, like a new energy, a new electricity. And by getting to know that experience and getting to know that part of yourself and the field of the feeling in yourself for something that's not true, and getting to really know that feeling when truth lands, it becomes this beautiful meter. And anytime that you read something or listen to something, when you kind of tune into that meter, You can feel when it's got constraint and stress and weight. You can feel when it's trying to support a structure of energy that doesn't stand on its own. And then
Mm.
when you read something that's very pure and true and coming from this totally anchored, truthful place, you can literally feel the ley line of the truth in it extending all the way back in time, like because truth never ends. Truth is the continuum, right? It's only the lies that we tell ourselves and others that form these sort of false timeline branches, and they don't
Right.
go anywhere. They're dead ends. That energy will only continue to stretch itself as it moves off of the current of the main channel of the river of the now, and eventually that energy's got to snap back. It's just
Mm-hmm.
physics. It's metaphysics, but there's real physics to it.
Mm. Yeah, I think also that a lot of our kind of traumas come from us having to be something that we're not. And what you're saying about getting back into the truth of who we are, there's tremendous liberation that comes with that. And it just comes out of really socialization and sort of shaming and stuff like that, because we're taught
Yeah.
at certain points throughout our life that certain behaviors or certain personality traits or certain interests or whatever it might be aren't okay. But when you do the self work to get to a point to see yourself clearly and just kind of accept what it is and let it be however you manifest truthfully, there's remarkable liberation that comes out of that, and so much just relief. Like you've been
Yeah.
carrying around this false sense of self for your whole life based on the opinions of other people that don't really
Yep.
matter, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and maybe the people matter, but the projection really doesn't. Like, how
Exactly.
many
Yeah.
people out there, grow up and maybe they have a parental figure, a dad or somebody who's like, he's going to be a doctor, and you like
Mm-hmm.
spend all this time growing up and you're like, but I kind of want to be a pilot, or like I really want to be an artist or a musician,
Yeah.
and there's other things that you're drawn to, and the more you get to know yourself, the more you're like, I am like not going to be a doctor, right? But even the things you thought about for yourself, that's like, I'm going to be this is what I'm going to be, and I think that makes sense, and I like it. That sense of what you're going to do for a living or what's going to be your career or whatever is really only as solid as your ability to know the truth about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the reasons why exploring past lives became so important to me. And I didn't even know what I was getting into. I was having spontaneous recall with people in college, and having to deal with, like, having memories with this girl who's like, the roommate of my girlfriend, like, and I'm having memories of being with her in the Middle Ages, and like now, and then I'm having dreams about her, and then I'm seeing her and she's like a Japanese woman and I'm a samurai, and I didn't know what the heck I was dealing with. It was just flooding in. And then, it took having this guy come to a Halloween party with us who I didn't know and she didn't really know, but he was into this one girl who was a friend of hers. And he gets super drunk and he literally starts calling us by the names that we remembered from that lifetime and apologizing to us for crimes he committed against us. He's like burning my villages and coming to lay siege to my castle. And I'm feeling the anger, the pain, and also the part of me that had already like forgiven him and let it go, and that really he just needed my forgiveness. He needed to actually receive it from me to like move through his own trauma and his own pain around it. And and from that experience, I started really studying it and really studying myself and looking at these experiences and taking it very seriously when I saw someone and I had a weird feeling that like they look like a Roman soldier to me, for example, or if there was something there, I started paying attention to those little signals of something I was being reminded of in the past. And the more I explored it and the more I got to know myself in those times and in my relationships with many different kinds of people, and in the journey that I've been on through all of not just beautiful, amazing, heroic moments, like tons of pain and sorrow and death and loss and mistakes. Like through getting to know myself in that longer now, I came to really understand who I am now and what I'm here to do and where my gifts really are and where my weaknesses are, so that I could admit them, and so that I can, make friends with people that can help me with those weaknesses, or, support the areas of my projects that I'm not great at. So getting to know ourselves, I think, is critical to deciding our path and what we're here to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's like a calibration of our feelings or something like that. And the more you can trust your feelings, your intuition, the information that your body and mind is giving you, the more success people seem to have in life. And that seems to be hard for a lot of people. I'm not sure why. I think that we're trained to not trust ourselves for some reason. And it's like it's a long journey to get back to that point where you can trust yourself fully and trust the information that you're being presented with from your nervous system and from your body, which is a very complete instrument to be able to discern these kinds of things and to help you make decisions.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of funk. There's a lot of like funk we got to clean off the pond so that we get the clear reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
I wanted to talk to you about aliens. Can we talk about aliens?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. I don't like that term that much, but
okay.
I'll forgive you this one.
Our galactic family. But I remember some years ago when we were hanging out, you were telling me about some of the work that you were doing around extraterrestrials and things like that. And I'm just very fascinated by that. And I was hoping that you could share a little bit more about your perspective on the extraterrestrial presence on the planet and what that means for us.
Yeah. Well, as a scientist and as a physicist and someone who I own a technology company, and I build encryption systems, setting context is really important, and I don't think we have enough time right now necessarily for me to give our listeners a really full picture of the context. However, I do have 2 episodes on Gaia TV on interviews with Ed. It's Ruben Langdon's show, and he's the stunt guy from Avatar. He played Jake Sully's actual blue Avatar being in Avatar. He's also a great filmmaker. And so that will help kind of set some foundation. And I have a lot of videos on my website at adamapollo.com too that also build a little bit more foundation than I can give right now. But I will say that, for me, getting to know myself going into the past, eventually I realized that I came to this world at a certain point, and I remembered exactly where I came from, and remembered that a bunch of my homies all came together to the earth around the time of Atlantis. I remembered what the earth looked like with ice, covering the polar regions, and this sort of tropical band with lots of, ships traveling between the continents and people traveling across the ice, and this height of civilization. And I remembered a lot about that civilization, even as young as my teens. But in coming into this awareness of myself as a being from another star system and choosing to come here, it gave me a lot more context for what was happening on the planet, and why our races on Earth are so very different, and looking, seeming like physically, bone structure, genetics, things like that, things that aren't very well explained by the sort of classic archaeological or biological assumption that, certain people had more sunlight and other people didn't. Like, when you really look at it, a lot of these maps of different cultures on the planet, including different races, really connect to have their roots in different star families. And it just makes a lot more sense when you start thinking about hybridization and different star families coming to Earth and merging with humanity at these height points to try to help, our planet get it together and become part of the rest of this big community. And Earth is this, amazing melting pot of species and life forms. And It's such a beautiful library, and it's one I think that's deeply cherished and would be deeply cherished by any being anywhere in the universe, because it's so rich and so beautiful as a planet. And if we start to consider the dynamics where, different star nations from different worlds, just run the scenario through your head with me for a moment. So I'm not just like putting it on you, but I'm just saying, try this one on and just see how it feels. If you imagine that that all of these different beings from different planetary systems came and incarnated here, and now they're not jumping on ships all the time, right? So they're not jumping on ships and flying to other worlds anymore. They don't have all the technology they need to have anything they want all the time anymore. And guess what? They're all the same race now. They're all the same species, right? They still all look a lot different. Like, we all have very different appearances, but we're the same species and we're stuck here. And we've got to deal with those differences at a level that we've never dealt with before. You can't run away from them. You can't just say, oh, that culture is different and that's over there. Like, you have to honor every culture for its difference. You have to honor every language for the fact that you may not be able to communicate the same way as somebody else. And you have to develop a deeper level of compassion and understanding for all peoples and all ways of life. It's a natural and beautiful learning process. And of course, it's mixed in with the natural genetic evolution of Gaia herself, who wants and clearly exudes a state of synarchy and harmony by the way that she develops every ecosphere on the planet. I mean, every ecosphere on the planet is full of all of these incredible interconnections between every species and every life form. Why would we assume that the rest of the universe is any different? I mean, we know now, finally, that there's like, all of these planets around all of these stars. In fact, at this point, we think that 99.99% of all stars have planets around them, and over 50% of those are likely, very likely, to have a planet that's in the position that could host life. And when you have a planet that's in the position that can have water and can host life, like, life is pretty resilient, I mean, it's amazing. There's life that shows up in the hottest spaces on the earth and the coldest vents at the bottom of the ocean, the highest pressure zones in the ocean. And so, yeah, there's a lot of life out there. And some of it is vastly different from us, so vastly different that we may have a hard time even imagining what those beings are like. But just like on Earth, as we see self-similar patternings in lots of flowers and lots of plants and lots of structures, so do we also find self-similar patterning across the galaxy. And many beings out there look just like us. And so that's one kind of important lens that lets you kind of wrap your mind and your arms around the beauty and the extent of the galactic family and their investment in this planet. And when you start to look at this time that we're in right now and the kinds of changes and transitions we're in, if you also try on the idea that maybe you are on another world, you developed your technology to be able to travel between worlds, you figured out that the quantum plenum or the vacuum is full of energy, so you started being able to tap unlimited energy locally wherever you are. And you've got replication, so you don't need resources anymore. You can make as much gold as you need. You can make as much of anything as you need because it's all just cymatic molecular alignments at the deepest level, right? And so you've mastered these pieces of tech and you've learned how to travel to other worlds. And now you actually, as you've graduated, so to speak, from your adolescence on your own planet, you become an adult and you start having to really look at how you're going to interact with worlds that aren't there yet, right? Like, and I think for some young species who just figure out star travel, maybe they haven't figured out resourcing and things like that yet. There have been some messes on Earth in the past from visits by species like that. But over time, the value of Earth became really well known, and those species that are a little older, that have kind of figured it out a little bit more, you know, the role of a smart adult is that, you know, you're going to let the kids skin their knees on the playground, right? So they're going to be messing around, they're going to make bombs, they're going to blow themselves up sometimes, but while you're going to let them play on the playground and skin their knees and have conflict, you're probably not going to let them like have a gun and shoot themselves, hopefully, right? And you're not going to let them get in a car accident. You're going to try to protect them if you can, you know, by steering things in the right direction, if you have the power to do that. That's what a smart parent would do. And so as a wise elder, you know, the application of how you would work with a planet like Earth is to support them in greater consciousness, greater awareness of who they are, realizing their connection is not, they're not alone. They've never been alone. Our connection with other planets and species has been here and has been documented for thousands and thousands of years. We've just mistranslated it lately, you know, and that, you know, we're going through this big transition where we're finally at a point in our species where we're leaving the surface of this earth and we're developing the capacity, and we will, to be able to travel throughout the rest of the galaxy. So it's like we're getting our, we're adolescents, but we're teenage, and we're finally getting our driver's license. And that means that we're going to be driving that car by ourselves. And so the galactic, you know, parents are like, okay, well, let's make sure you really know how to drive that thing before I'm going to just like give you the car. Right.
Yeah.
And that means like, you know, we have to go through our initiation processes, develop some of the fundamental spiritual understandings necessary to work with this level of technology. And when I say spiritual understandings, I actually, you know, at a deeper level, am referring to actually the ethics of life, like actually applying the deeper ethical principles that are necessary to support the ongoing life on Earth. But the codex is all here. I mean, between, you know, the brilliance of Bucky Fuller and Janine Beus and biomimicry, and, you know, the visionary artists like yourself who are sharing such incredible visions and work out there to help people start to accept and open up to what this next level of life is going to look like. You know, we've got the seeds that we need, and now we have to actually just practice being the beings that we're destined to be, and living that way, and accepting people that way, and become a galactic family of Earth.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that is, if I was a highly evolved race of star beings looking down on the planet, I don't think I would give humanity the keys to the starship quite yet. It'd be like, maybe after you stop killing each other, then we'll give you the keys to the starship and you can go explore the galaxy.
Yeah.
But this has been a really fascinating conversation, man, and I feel like we're just getting started. So I hope that we can jump into another conversation another time and keep this going.
Sure.
But I just got the 2 minutes left little notification.
Okay.
So thank you so much, man. Thanks so much for your time. It was a really inspiring chat, and thanks for everybody for tuning in and listening to us.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining and for all your great comments and waves and highs. And Hugo times, I'll wrap it up by just saying, I mean, not with rockets at all, but with starships. And starships, if you're going to travel to other worlds, rockets really suck. So you definitely want to have faster than light tech, superluminal tech, creating a gravitational envelope around a craft to travel faster than light. And I talk about that in some of my galactic technology seminars and workshops and stuff, so you can check that out. But the primer to getting there is developing the ability to astral travel, because you can't pilot a starship that travels faster than light unless you learn how to do it on the astral first, because you can't use radar, it's too slow. You got to use you got to use your body's ability and augment that. So I'll leave you guys with that one.
Right on. Yeah, I really want to talk to you about this another time. Thanks,
Sounds
man.
good, Jake. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
Much love. Good
All
to
right,
see you.
aloha. You too, homie.